I'll try for a longer one. There were some earlier longer ones, but so far back. I certainly talked about the after effects of sexual abuse. The after effects of having my father effectively confess 2 murders to me were different. I was in my 30s by then. It was a whole different ball game to handle those things, and at least I had 20 years advantage on my younger self. I'm not sure when I officially went off the rails. For most of my teens, I was too sick to really go off the rails. I think I've listed, OCD, self-harm, anorexia, bulimia, alcoholism, agoraphobia, claustrophobia. I've been through that list. They were all after effects of sexual abuse. Oh, and suicide attempts. An illegitimate child. That was a big deal in 1975. And my parents did not confessed to me at that time that I was also an illegitimate child, and so was my brother. In fact, they never confessed it to me. I just confronted them with it one day. Going off the rails, I suppose alcoholism would have been certainly one way. I never did do street drugs, hard drugs, whatever. As apparently some of my family members thought I did. All I can say is, I suppose it's hard to differentiate between mental illness and drug use, and certainly alcohol is a drug. Even at the time that I was not really acknowledging all that had happened to me, I drank to forget. From my late teens, I did that, and was a heavy drinker, I suppose, by probably about 20. I could have told you exactly once, but I used to drink as much as I could, as fast as I could, to get as drunk as I could, and I would carry on drinking until I was dropped down unconscious. That was my alcoholism, and I suppose you could certainly call that off the rails. My father surrounded me with men who were not good for me and were never going to be good for me. And there are some I have not mentioned in anything I've uploaded. If I try chronology, there was a guy called Georgie who was 20 years my senior. I have talked about him in an earlier video, slightly wary of uploading. He finished what my father had begun. He taught me how to please men. And yet he was a misogynist of the nth degree. A terrible misogynist who didn't actually fancy women. And that's not some sort of vanity. He did not fancy women. He didn't like to touch women. He was in my life for 2 years, and although in some ways he sort of dragged me out of the darkness, in other ways he played serious games with my head. There were always with these men, and it took me quite a while to realise that my father had introduced all of them into my life, except for one, and that is odd. I was engaged for a little while to a single father, and I by then was a single mother. And the guy had 2 beautiful children who I loved very much. What is odd about him is that he was an orphan from Jersey. Anyone remember Haute de la Garenne? And at the other end of this path, he was a carpenter who helped build the last of Edward Heath's morning clouds. Now, some people will be familiar with a story I totally believe, that children were taken from Haute de la Garenne by Jimmy Savile and handed over to Edward Heath for his use, his sexual use, and were thrown overboard when he'd finished with them. And here I am engaged. Of course, I knew none of this at the time, but I was engaged to a man who had connections at both ends of that. A man I still consider was a decent man. He was also a very heavy drinker and a very heavy smoker. I don't think I need to take too many guesses as to why. And he was a good dad to his kids. I don't think he was a bad man, even now. And then there was a man called Ken Browning. I think that actually is in chronological order. My husband, I have not said on an uploaded video, was a violent man and a man who would not work, and who, even when he was on benefits, kept them all for himself. Although we were married and the benefits were for all of us, he insisted they were his. I had to do something to pay the rent and keep the roof over our heads, and I had 2 O-levels. My husband introduced me to topless go-go dancing. He might deny it now, but he did. And of course that brought in a little bit of bacon. And I also did glamour modelling. After my father tried to take my daughter from me on grounds of moral danger, and I got her back from the court, the one and only condition was that I could not model in my own home, which was where Ken Browning came in. He took me to his home in Pagham, where I would do this modelling. I don't want to say a damn word more about that, actually, except that horrendous years. Then in 1987, Ken told me, by this time my life was straightened up, and began to straighten up in 85 when I divorced my husband, stopped drinking, and went to evening classes. In 87, Ken Browning was still in my life as a friend, and he told me he'd joined a porn ring, and introduced me to an evil man called Greg Byworth. I did warn him not to involve me or my family, i.e. my children. That is to say, I warned Ken not to do that. June 87 he told me about this porn ring. April 88 he told me that a man named Peter Raw had asked him to upload, to transfer child porn from Cinefilm to videos, at which point I searched his home, found hideous videos, and when I say hideous, I can still see them in my mind's eye, and I will never stop seeing them. and photographs ditto. I went to the police, but the police already knew a bit about it, but they interviewed me. The deaths began soon after. And Ken Browning was one of the first to go.